This
Thank you.
conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, everyone who is able to join us. Good afternoon. I'm Knut Rostad. I'm your humble moderator today, and I welcome you to Fiduciary September. Fiduciary September is the largest annual conversation of investment advisors, financial planners, and other experts on the importance of fiduciary. That we will have over a course of about 3.5 weeks. We will have now 10 panels featuring over 30 speakers, and that will bring us to the close of the month. This afternoon's topic is a new FPA in 2022. And with us today, we have 3 esteemed speakers, led by Skip Schweiss, who is here on wearing several hats that I can tell. He's here wearing the hat of the FPA board. He's also here, and I've given this hat, and he's never actually accepted it, the hat of Ambassador of Financial Planning and Fiduciary over the last several years. And but I still think it fits, and he's waiting for his presidential appointment, and I think it's forthcoming, but I won't say anything about that. Then we have Evan Simonoff from Financial Advisor magazine. Anyone who's been involved in the world of financial advice knows Evan by name and by pen. And he fortunately was able to break the story last month of FPA separating from the Financial Planning Coalition. And then, do we have Jeffrey McClure here in some form that I am not seeing? Oh, well, okay, guess not. I'm hoping that he will join. Jeffrey McClure runs a wealth management firm in Texas, the Personal Wealth Coach. He is here more specifically because 8 years ago, he published an excellent treatise on financial planning and profession and being a profession or becoming a profession. And I don't know that there's anything else out there that quite does the job that he does in terms of discussing the status of financial planning as a profession. So with those introductions, I'm going to have a couple of words on to ask the question, why are we here today? We're here today for a number of reasons. The first one being Evan's breaking story sort of prompted the timing of this, which I thought was quite fortunate. In fact, because it preceded Fiduciary September, and I want to thank you for that, Evan. That was very thoughtful of you. But we're also here for I think a couple of other reasons that are even perhaps more important. And if you look in your schedule for later this week on Thursday, we have a panel discussing the background and the story of FPA challenging the mighty SEC and winning that lawsuit. And we've got 3 FPA members who were there at the time and helped made it happen. And that is a little piece of history that I think unfortunately has gotten lost, but is a very very important story. So I urge you to come back and listen to that panel as well. Oh, and by the way, I should say that panel includes in their individual capacities Dan Moyson, number 1, Dave Yeski, 2, and Elizabeth Jetton, 3, who were, as I said, were all there at the time. So that takes, that is another reason why we're here. The third reason that I think about the importance of this has to do with and this is by chance. Yesterday, the infamous Sarah Grillo had a podcast on CFP board, and there was something that was very important and unfortunately unique that happened in that podcast. I wasn't there to listen to it, but I heard the recording sort of late last night. And one of the thing that I'm referring to that happened was there was an adult conversation among 2 individuals who disagreed that was actually civil and productive. And I say that because I think sometimes we lose track of how much the conversation in the world that we work in has no longer become been a conversation. It is in my view too often similar to what we see on the national political scene, where one side is throwing grenades at the other side and not producing very much other than, frankly, damage. But in this conversation, and particularly towards the end of the podcast, you had JR, who is I think still here, and yes, he is. I can see him there. He's hiding behind his mask. And another individual who was talking on behalf of the CFP board, but not from the CFP board. And there was actually a back and forth, and it was civil. And guess what? You could learn something. And so that is the other thing that comes to my mind. The other part, which is a different type of call out. Apparently, Sarah made several overtures to the CFP board to directly have someone come and represent them, and they declined. And I want to say with total candor that was really too bad. And I hope that whatever consultant is being listened to over there, that they reconsider their advice that they're getting, because it would have even been a better discussion if CFP board had been directly represented. So that's my opening remarks. That's why we're here, and that's why Skip Schweiss is going to start off and give a fantastic set of opening remarks. Skip, you're on.
You have set the bar of expectations high, Knut, between nominating me for ambassador of something and telling attendees that I'm going to give a fantastic set of remarks. I am honored to be here and to once again participate in Fiduciary September. I think it's been really a terrific event for quite a few years now. Excited to share the virtual stage here with Evan, and I hope Jeffrey comes on. I echo your sentiment. I read his paper not long after it came out in 2014. I think it was his master's thesis for his master's in financial planning program at Texas Tech. And shortly after it came out, I read it and I was so excited about it. I was at TD Ameritrade then, and we invited him to come to our next conference and speak about it. So I had a chance to meet him and have since re-reviewed the paper. I think it's really, really well done. And maybe I'll just say one more thing about the paper. The full title was The Profession and Practice of Personal Financial Planning. And in it, he explores whether financial planning is a true profession. And he applies various screens, if you will, to answer that question, and ultimately coming to the conclusion. I shouldn't speak for him. I do hope he comes on so he can speak for himself, but he comes to the conclusion financial planning is not yet a profession, or at least wasn't in 2014. So I'm going to leave that one there, and I will turn my attention to what I'm supposed to be talking about, a new FPA in 2022, question mark. Knut asked me to give a few minutes of opening before we turn it to Evan and hear a few of his thoughts. I've known Evan for a very long time and have had many conversations with him. He's probably the most experienced and insightful in the business of financial planning and covering that industry or profession, whichever term you care to use. So a bit about FPA, since we're here to talk about that. I will remind people or level set that the Financial Planning Association is a product of the merger between the International Association for Financial Planning and the Institute of Certified Financial Planners back on January 1st of 2000, when we all thought our computers were going to stop or go crazy on us and ruin our lives. So those two organizations merged on January 1st of 2000 and became the Financial Planning Association. And today, 22 years later, that membership organization serves about 19,000 members. Roughly 2/3 of those are certified financial planners. The others are either practicing financial planners who do not carry the CFP mark, or others who are involved in the practice of financial planning, whether it be vendors to the planning profession or others. Again, totaling about 19,000 members. We have about 80 chapters around the country. Those chapters are independent legal entities. They are separate and distinct from the national FPA organization. But that is a way for FPA to deliver content and networking opportunities into the communities across the country where financial planners live and practice. I am currently chair of the FPA board in 2022. I am nearing the end of my 6-year term on the FPA board, 3 years as a board member, 3 years in a leadership role. And it's been a great journey. I'm very impressed with not only my colleagues on the national board and the time they give to the profession and the association, but all of those who are serving in volunteer capacities across the country in the chapters as well, and on national committees, et cetera. There are quite a few individuals who are giving a lot of themselves to further the profession of financial planning. We do publish the Journal of Financial Planning, which is often in our member surveys rated one of the most valued benefits of membership. There are many reasons that people belong, and of course, if there are 19,000 members, there are probably 19,000 reasons why people belong, whether it's the networking opportunities at local chapter meetings or national meetings or the journal. People often talk about the online discussion boards as being very helpful when they're perhaps facing a difficult planning engagement and need some insights on how to handle that, or they're looking to refer a client to perhaps an estate attorney in another part of the country. They can get help from their fellow members, so that's a value as well. And like most associations, we have a variety of discounts on products and services that planners use in their businesses as well. So with that backdrop, Knut, I'd like to talk about a couple of issues that I think have brought us together today. You mentioned at the top FPA's exit from the Financial Planning Coalition. I'll touch on that, as well as our recently announced initiative to pursue title protection. I will start with the FPA's announced exit from the Financial Planning Coalition. That coalition was formed, I should have done better research on this, but in the last decade or so, by an alliance of the CFP board, NAPFA, and the FPA to work together on issues jointly that elevate the profession, whether it be public policy advocacy or education or other things. FPA, and I did see it reported that FPA decided to exit the coalition due to differences over this title protection initiative. I can tell you I was in the boardroom for those discussions and cast a vote, and that really wasn't the driving force. It was really more of a, we're still going to work together, we're still friends, but FPA is going to apply its resources now toward this title protection initiative. And one of the things we've heard from our members is it's time to focus on one issue and not a whole host of issues. So that is the direction we're going. In fact, I just over breakfast today was talking with Kevin Keller, the CEO of the CFP board, and Patrick Mahoney, the CEO of FPA, and we were having a perfectly cordial time together. So we will continue to work together on issues as they arise where we think we can make 1 + 1 = 3. So that's a word or two about exiting the Financial Planning Coalition. Now turning to title protection. When I first joined the board, I would go to a lot of events. This was pre-COVID. I would love to talk to members, or members would call me or write to me and about certain issues, and we'd get into conversations. And if we got into conversations about public policy issues, the thing that I consistently heard is our members say is what really upset them was that the professional salesperson down the road from them, with whom they were competing for clients, might have a brokerage license, insurance licenses, and was calling themselves a financial planner. And they said, hey, I've got my CFP. I've been a planner for so many years. I do full service holistic financial planning. For an insurance salesman to call themselves a financial planner just doesn't quite feel right. And I'm not disparaging insurance salesmen. I have a broker I work with whom I respect very much. He does a good job for me, but it's different than being a financial planner. So I was hearing a lot of this anecdotally in my travels around, physically and virtually. And then we do periodically take member sentiment surveys, as I mentioned earlier. We ask about a lot of things, satisfaction with various elements of their membership and where they see their practices going and markets going and all sorts of things. And early this year, we did that survey and we asked about title protection, and we asked if members would support FPA getting behind a title protection initiative, and 78% of members responded in the affirmative. Now, I also saw that number kind of reversed in one headline after that said, despite 22% opposition from its own members, FPA will proceed with title protection. It wasn't 22% opposition, it was 78% in support. Every sentiment survey I've ever seen has about 15% of the respondents who say not sure. And that's about what we had here. It was actually more like, I think it was closer to 17 or 18%, and I think 4% were opposed. So the board considered all of this, the overall landscape, anecdotal input from members, as well as this survey, as well as the fact or perception that we felt we had been a bit too scattered perhaps in our public policy work over the years to be effective, and that we really should plant a flag on one issue and really put our energy and our resources behind that. And this was identified as that issue. It's simply that we believe in order to call yourself a financial planner, you should have to carry certain credentials. Now, that's sort of a period as we sit here today. And Knut, you and I have had 2 or 3 of our usual lively conversations, probably along the lines of what you were describing in the podcast last night, where there were some opposing viewpoints expressed, but in a professional and constructive and respectful way. And I like to tease my friend Knut a little bit. I know he's an annual visitor to his home country of Norway. And I say, think of this like this, Knut. We're saying we're going to go to Norway. And you say, that's wonderful. When are you going? And we say, well, we haven't decided that yet. Well, how long are you going to spend in Norway? Well, we haven't decided that yet. Well, what's your budget for this trip? We haven't decided that yet. What points of interest are you going to visit in Norway? Well, we'll get to that later. I understand that leaves a longing in the mind of the questioner. Okay, you said you're going to Norway, but you're not telling me much else. And that's because the next step is we're going to get together, we're going to do outreach. Oh, Jeffrey McClure has arrived, wonderful. And I'm nearly finished. We're going to be doing reach out to various parties in the financial services industry, and we're going to have conversations about what different organizations and thought-leading individuals think this should look like. But ultimately, that's the direction we're going to go and to lead is that, and I'll repeat what I said a minute ago, if you're going to call yourself a financial planner, you ought to have certain credentials. I can't just go out and call myself a doctor. I can't put a sign up outside my building saying I'm a doctor, or put up a website or have a business card saying I'm a doctor. Consumers instinctively know that. If I call myself a doctor, I'd better have certain educational credentials, certain licensing, certain regulatory oversight. And we think that ought to be the case with financial planners as well. We think the work we do for their clients is that important, and that if you call yourself a planner, you should have certain credentials. I wrap up. I see, Knut, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have my hand up because you got so excited, Skip, you went over your time, but we won't say anything about that. But no, but thank you for your introduction. I just want to be attentive to the clock and get Jeff on right away. And And Jeff and Evan have been suggested to stay within 5 minutes so that we have plenty of time for the questions from our illustrious fourth estate afterwards. So, Jeff, you want to chime in? Okay, we can't hear you.
Volume?
Well, I think you're turned off. You're muted, Jeff. It doesn't work as well. No.
There should be a little green button near the bottom.
Bottom left.
Where's a 20-year-old when you need them, right?
Okay.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
go.
It's off the screen.
Okay. Jeff, did you hear my comments or not?
I did. I can hear. I just couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I needed my 20-year-old.
Yeah. Okay. So my point is, please stay within the 5 minutes
Sure.
for opening up, and then we can
will.
come back and explore. Thank you. Thank you.
I wrote my thesis on this for a master's degree, and it's something I spent a lot of time digging into. It's called Professionalism and the Practice of Personal Financial Planning. And there's a bottom line to all professions. They are regulated at the state level. They have a state professional board that regulates them, composed of citizens and members of the profession. They are authorized to take actions on behalf of the state. If you think about nobody else can get a knife out and cut you legally except a doctor. Nobody else can substitute for a city in approving a building structure except an engineer, a licensed professional engineer. And you start down the list of what professionals do by any academic definition of professional, and you find out they are licensed at the state level, and they do things that are delegated to them from the state's authority. In the United States, the only professionals that are at the national level that I could find are the military. And since the military states don't have their own armies, they have a National Guard, but they don't have their own functional armies. So that's the only one. And I think the CPA model, the engineer model, are really good models to go with. And the second aspect, and one of the reasons I appreciate the FPA looking like it's taking some separate action here, is at the end, I can't call myself a certified financial planner. Why? Because it's a trademark. It's got a trademark on it. Now, what is it? Look at that word trademark, and you realize that means that financial planning is a trade. And I'll assure you, if you go to any financial planning conference, or if you go to a trade conference, you will see the similarities instantly. And that's probably the key that I wanted to bring up. And again, the states require certification in some form. That's it. I was under 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Jeff. We hope we'll hear more from you. Evan?
Okay, thanks, Knut, and thanks for putting this event on today and for all the events you're holding this month. I also just want to extend my appreciation to Skip for during the last 7-8 years when there's been almost endless debate about the so-called fiduciary rule. He has been a source to my entire editorial staff. And a lot of us would think that, putting a client's interest first should be a simple, straightforward activity that doesn't require a lot of thoughts. But this is a complex business, and there you get into a lot of hair-splitting issues, and Skip has always been available to the staff to share his pretty impressive swath of knowledge about that. So I'm going to turn this back to him in just a couple of minutes. The issue of title protection, I've covered this business now 30 years, and it does seem sometimes times like the more things change, the more they stay the same. There was, when I started back in 1990, there was a lot of talk about this. There was a bill in front of Congress that never got all that far, called the voucher bill, from a longtime congressman in Virginia. It seemed that few in the business disagreed that people should, whether you say you're a trade or a profession, but what do you consider a hairdresser? In a lot of states, hairdressers have to meet a higher standard to call themselves a hairdresser than financial planners have to do to, anybody can call themselves a financial planner in most states. I don't know of any. So this has been a really old issue. When Skip said earlier that that when they held a vote among the membership of the FPA and it was 78-4, I did find myself asking who was the 4%. I know there is some feeling that you don't want to hurt, anybody's right to make a living, that they have the freedom to call themselves what they want. But as Jeffrey alluded, with a lot of states have found that in certain professions that can end up in a pretty dangerous position. I mean, I don't think any state would want anybody to call themselves a brain surgeon or anything. The issue that I see, and I think would guess that it played some role in Skip's discussion this morning with Kevin Keller, at least it was touched upon, is how best to achieve this. And it would seem, from what I would wish the CFP board were here today to discuss this, but it would appear that they would want to do this on a federal level, which would obviously be the most efficient and effective. I also don't know how realistic that is. I mean, we watched Washington for a long, long time, and they really, getting them to focus on something like this is not easy. Just let me put it that way. So, I was wondering, maybe Skip could address this. Is there a feeling that if the FPA were able to get a few big states, say California, New York, Florida, a handful of others, to embrace this, that it could eventually become a fait accompli? I don't really know if that's what you're thinking. You might want to address that, but I mean, I have to ask myself, what is it going to take? And I can see the counter argument, because is it going to take some big bear market or something like the financial crisis, and where millions of Americans suffer fairly irreparable financial damage, and then they'll swing into action? I don't know that. I understand what Jeff was saying about the states regulating it, like they've done fairly successfully with other professions. My own experience with state legislatures hasn't been all that positive, but I haven't had that much experience with them, fortunately so. So anyway, let me turn this back to Knut, and I'm sure he'll want to have some questions of his own.
Well, thank you, Evan. Well, first, Skip, is there anything you want to respond to what Evan just said right now briefly, or do you want to hold back to get some more data to work with, or what? But so anyway, you want to say anything right now, or?
I will briefly, and I recognize I've used my time allotment earlier, so I apologize for that. The one thing I wanted to respond to was the federal versus state. I don't want to speak for CFP board, but they are on record through a September of 18 op-ed in one of our public industry publications that they think a state-by-state approach is the incorrect approach to this, and anyone can go back and read that and read their reasons why. We've had multiple conversations with them since then about that. I realize there are trade-offs here. Evan and Jeffrey are correct in asserting that professions are regulated at the state level by and large. Doctors, lawyers, CPAs. I always have to include teachers in my list of professions because my daughter's a teacher and she's licensed in the state of Colorado where she teaches.
And she's listening right now. Is that correct, Skip?
I think she's probably in the classroom teaching right now.
Okay, good. All right.
Teaching third graders in Denver.
Okay.
So that is where professions are regulated and licensed. What we're not talking about here is licensing in terms of FPA's initiative. That's different than title protection, but it would of course be more efficient to get this done once at the federal level, not to mention the consistency factor, especially for firms that are larger and doing business across the country. It would be wonderful to have this done once at the federal level. It's harder for me to see a path there, but I am open-minded. I think it would probably have to be more of a regulatory path than a legislative path.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Could I make
Tracy,
a comment about that?
yes, go ahead, Jeffrey.
The problem is there is no legal framework for regulating a profession at the federal level other than, for example, the SEC regulates investment advisors, and we've seen how well that works when an investment advisor and a broker can be the same thing at the same moment. But a doctor, for example, is by definition a fiduciary. And my discussions off the record with some people at who were in authority at the time at the CFP board, actually one of the presidents at one point, was that the CFP board earnestly desires to hang on to this because that's its source of income and identity. Turning it over to state boards, as other professions have done, would make this the CFP board like the AMA, a voluntary membership, and would make it, he said, frankly, it'd make it like the FPA. You don't have to be a member. And we like to have control of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, you've been waiting there. Do you want to jump in with a question or two, or you want to hold back a little bit, or what?
You're on mute.
Mike,
Tracy?
Tracy.
Sorry,
Mike,
you're, am I on mute now? Yeah.
No, you're okay. Okay.
hear you.
So I'm not clear what this would look like or what you're thinking. And I know you said it's very early in the discussions, Skip, as you know, like the trip to Norway is. But if you could sketch out, you know, maybe what it would look like, and I'd be interested in who you think the opposition is to this. Evan and I were kind of just talking for a few minutes this morning, and you know, I was trying to think of who the 600-pound gorillas are, and there's so many fiefdoms, as Jeff just mentioned. You know, the CFP board is probably one of them, but the SEC, and then you know, FINRA, and then you have other groups. So just trying to noodle through who you think the opposition is, I guess, to this, and what path you think this could take, and if you even have a timeline on it.
My answers will likely not satisfy Tracy, but
Okay.
we are in the very earliest days of reach out to some of these other organizations. You're absolutely right. Financial services has so many different member associations and regulatory bodies that you know, they exist because there are different sleeves in this industry, whether it's insurance, brokerage, advisory, asset management. Everyone's got their own but their own take on things. If you look at the difference, say, between FPA and NAPFA, there's actually quite a bit of member overlap in those two organizations. But if you look at kind of why they exist and what the membership composition is. You know, you have two different organizations representing financial planners there. As to the path, again, the next step is to really confer with all of these entities on what their thoughts are. I think that's going to flush out where the opposition might be, where the support might be, where the, gee, we'd support you if it looked like this, but not if it looked like that. And we're just in very early days on that at this point.
Okay, Skip, I'd like to jump in here. First of all, in terms of your parallel to Norway, I would reverse it. And this is not just a rhetorical answer. And go back 1,000 years when Leif Erikson was leaving for his voyage to North America. That's about what you look like right now in terms of FPA, because he had even less a clue in terms of where he was going or what he was doing or how he was going to get there. So so when you tell the story, I would reverse it. But I want to go back very quickly to 3 points from the announcement, from your op-ed to your podcast. And there are 3 questions. First of all, is the FPA's view today that financial planning is or is not a profession? And this is going to sound like a trick question, but it's not, because Skip, you know where I'm going to say. A year and a half ago, Skip, you started a conversation in January that was really good, I thought, and I wrote about it. And so I'm going to say this, so get ready for the next part. And you made the clear point that financial planning wasn't there yet, and that you're going to work every day, and you're going to work very hard, and you're going to make it happen, but it was a long journey. Now, 18 months later, the first sentence of an op-ed by one of your leaders is financial planning is a profession. Now, either you have done more in the last year and a half than you gave yourself credit for, or Skip, I'm going to tell you, it looks like that FPA doesn't quite have its ducks in a row, because that has to be the starting point. Where are you starting from? And those are 2 different things. So that's my first question. You want to respond to that?
Yes. First of all, I appreciate your flipping the coin on my Norway metaphor. I think yours is better. We're exploring unknown lands, and yes, it's going to take a long time. Thanks for that. I can give you my personal view, Knut, that I don't think financial planning is a profession. I can't be a doctor and...
all right, but okay, Skip, I heard you a year and a half ago. You weren't there, Skip Schweiss, citizen from Colorado. You were there representing the FPA board, and you said it wasn't a profession, and you had again, what I call an adult conversation. You spoke truthfully, you spoke candidly, and it really sounded good. And now 18 months later, it seems that it's sort of switched on its head. And all of a sudden, financial planning is a profession. So what is FPA's view? Is it or is it not a profession today?
Someone earlier mentioned about splitting hairs and nuance, and I have that debate with members, some of whom are leaders of the entity, whether it's a profession or not.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, I would have thought that FPA would have had a position. That's my first question. My second question is, in terms of this journey that you were set out on with FPA, and you talk about developing standards, and you talk about minimum standards. And I'm just scratching my head and saying, my goodness gracious. I mean, is it as though the last 15 years didn't even happen? What have we gone through the last 15 years with this other organization, which is the 800-pound gorilla in terms of developing the standards, holding out to be a fiduciary, and then putting meaning into that. So and I think this goes to Tracy's question about who's going to oppose you. Well, is FPA going to come out and say that we're going to do something different? We're actually going to not first just proclaim that we are fiduciaries. We're going to demonstrate. We're going to show you why and how our members actually are fiduciaries, and stop bragging about it. I mean, I can't believe I'm the only one that over the last 10 years has just gotten tired of hearing this braggadocio from CFP board, when they should know that they can't in any stretch of the imagination demonstrate that that's the case. So that's the second issue in terms of standards and conduct standards. And well, I'll stop there, because that plays into Tracy's question in terms of who's going to oppose you and who's not going to oppose you. Maybe the third one is, I read different articles and got different views on whether you're going to go state, the federal level. And listen, I think, and I've said this without Jeff sitting here, I think Jeff is absolutely right. If you want to be a serious profession, there's only one way to go. But the other thing is, I mean, has anybody even looked at what's happened with the SEC in Congress over the last dozen years with advice and fiduciary? The whole notion that anybody who's serious would want to go back to Congress and the SEC, I think they've slept through the last 15 years, literally. They've slept through it because they are not seeing the destruction that has happened to advice and fiduciary during this time at the hands of the SEC. So, okay, I'll stop there and give you something to chew on, or maybe Tracy has a follow-up question. But anyway.
I'm still interested in the opposition, but I know you said, Skip, that you know it's in the early stages. I guess I'm wondering, who could possibly be on either side? If you got the AARP, for instance, on the, we're for this side. What about, the FSI, SIFMA, Wall Street? I guess that would be my follow-up question is, are you having any talks, or have you heard, over the last few years at FPA, whether or not Wall Street and Main Street, as Dale Brown would tell you, would support a carve out for the financial planning industry and licensing?
So I'll go back to, we're in very early days of talking to other associations and companies. And yes, you mentioned AARP. We plan to reach out to consumer organizations as well, because we think even though FPA exists for its members as a 501c6 entity, we believe that consumers are a stakeholder here, that they deserve to have clarity on who they're dealing with. I want to go back to one of the things that Knut said in his typical, admirably passionate way about the word minimum in front of standards. And he and I have had a couple of phone conversations debating the use of this word minimum. And I understand it. In our press release, we said we think you ought to have minimum standards to call yourself a financial planner. Some have read the word minimum to mean low, and that's not the intent of our use of the word. And so perhaps we could use a better word. I know in some other forums we've used the word threshold. It is not our intent to say, let's set the bar low to call yourself a financial planner. It's the intent is to say, let's set a bar, period, because today there is no bar to call yourself a financial planner.
Tracy, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I hope it didn't go out of my head. I think it did go out of my head. I had it for a second, then I kept typing. So I'll come back to it. Thank you.
Do we have any other journalists on this call that I have not recognized or seen yet that would like to ask a question? Okay. Evan, you're obviously.
Yeah, I have one question. Actually alludes to a story Tracy did decades ago with about the insurance industry and the ACLI, and we talked about state regulation, and the insurance industry is regulated on a state by state basis. And while it's not exactly the same, there is the NAIC that is one of the leading entity of the umbrella organization for all the state regulators, insurance commissioners. It seems like at the time the ACLI was talking about, which is the American Council of Life Insurers, which is their Washington lobby, I believe. And they were very frustrated that because it was state regulated, it held the industry back. And created a patchwork quilt of different regulations that made it quite expensive and inefficient to operate. And I realized, every policy had to be approved in every state, and so you would find a lot of insurers that would only operate in certain states. And I'm just wondering, to refer to what Jeff said, is that yes, he's right, and he made a good point about the CFP board, because were you to go to the state regulation model, you would then have all these state financial planning regulators probably costing more money, with making the CFP board just a umbrella organization. But I'm just wondering if there's some way all this could be coordinated, so to make the industry or profession more efficient, to standardize things, because you're often going to have a client who moves from one state to another. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yes, I have. I've looked into that very deeply. You had a key word in there: regulating an industry. An industry is not a profession. Financial planning is pretty close to being a trade industry right now. And matter of fact, that's pretty much what it is. It's a sales industry for a trade, and the trade is financial products, and similar to plumbers, only not as licensed as plumbers. So the state system doesn't impose a layer of regulators per se. It has a board for professionals, very much unlike the insurance model. And it is composed of, in this case, ideally, the state medical board is composed of doctors and members of the public, physicians and members of the public. The state accountancy board is composed of members of the public and certified public accountants. It is a key thing to recognize that states handle professions very differently than they handle the regulation of industry. Yes, indeed, every industry. Matter of fact, there is a model there. It is not the best one, perhaps. The investment advisory model is regulated by every state. It's also regulated at the federal level. But we would need something as profound as the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, which we are not going to get, in my humble opinion, unless we have another Great Depression. Now, if we have another Great Depression and it gets blamed on financial planners and they survive, we might get that law. But I don't think we want to go through that.
Thank you.
So it's a completely different to regulate an industry. The trucking industry is regulated at every state. It's also regulated federally. But regulating an industry and regulating a profession are two completely different things.
Evan, Tracy, any follow-up?
I remembered my question. This would be pretty much for you, Skip, and you, Jeff, if you want to jump in. Some groups like Knut's, Fiduciary, advocacy groups complain that the SEC has truly blurred the lines between advice and brokerage. And I sat in, Skip, on your last Fiduciary Month webinar as well, and you made distinctions as well. Do you think this title clarification would be compensation neutral? And do you think it could, clearly delineate these groups, these professions in consumers' minds? Is that one reason why you think this is important, or, is that off base?
No, I don't think the question is off base. As you know, FPA has long stated that it is compensation neutral. It doesn't believe compensation defines, and I'm going to at least loosely parrot something that JR has said in the chat here. I don't think compensation defines whether someone's a good planner or a bad planner. We've seen good brokers and bad brokers, and good advisors and bad advisors. If we were to say that you had to be fee only to call yourself a financial planner, I think you can you can go back, Tracy, to your previous question about where the opposition might come from. I think that might make the mountain insurmountable.
Well, it would make the mountain insurmountable if you want to create an empire, Skip. And now I'm being very blunt. If you, as opposed to want to create a profession, Jeff, I will defer to you here. But if you start out saying that we want to create an empire of members, that's a different proposition than if you want to start out saying that we want to create a profession based on standards and ethics. So, one of my complaints with CFP board is they operate like a political party. It's about fundraising. It's about increasing membership. It's about winning elections. They don't operate like a professional association of whose focus is high standards. But anyway, Jeff, if you want to come in on that, please do. If not, then we'll ask somebody else.
Let me simply put this way. In the past, physicians could operate a lab, for example, and refer their patients to that lab and receive compensation, sales compensation, in effect. They could sell drugs at one point. Professions across the board, as they mature, require a very clear line of compensation and forbid sales. Lawyers don't sell things to you. Doctors don't sell things to you. Shoot, airline pilots don't. I mean, they fly the airplane, but they don't sell you anything. But and I recognize, having been a broker for 25 years, that this creates a conflict, a financial conflict in some people's minds. But the bottom line to it is, being a fiduciary who is compensated greatly for selling something that has a higher compensation rate, I think in the mind of the public, at least in my experience, is inconsistent completely. I don't like that idea. I mean, I'd love to, I recognize, and I know some people who get commissions and they're perfectly happy with their commissions. I was convinced when I was both that I was being completely impartial. Reality, confession from Jeff McClure. When I thought I was being the greatest broker in the world, and I may have been, I don't know, I was a pretty good broker, had a lot of clients who thought highly of me. The products that I use today, mutual funds, for example, are pretty radically different from the products I used then to accomplish the same thing. We hunt and peck for the lowest possible cost. And I think that's what a fiduciary has got to do in the financial business. If that's, again, this is my opinion, and it is also, if you look, and I encourage any of you that haven't, I know that I'm peddling something here. I won't charge you for it. Read the thesis, because I went through very carefully through the history of professions and watched them through history. As the engineering didn't used to be a profession. Accountancy didn't used to be a profession. Watched as they developed into professions, and they're professions for two reasons. One, the state has enshrined them in law, each state. And by the way, the Uniform Fiduciary Standard is a law. There's a model law that was adopted by every state. There's no reason that model can't apply to financial planners. I realize that would mean people who are brokers, who are insurance agents, would have to identify themselves as brokers and insurance agents. Oh, how terrible. I went through the first 15 years of my career not able to call myself a financial planner, because the broker dealer I was working with says you are a registered representative or a broker. There's lots of things we could say, but they didn't want to get into the investment advisory business. And how the SEC well, I actually write that up in there, how the SEC let that slip in. But anyway, that's where I stand on it.
Thank you, Jeff. JR, you've been waiting there patiently. If you've got a question that you can express in 15 or 20 seconds, please do so. You've heard a lot and you've got lots of opinions, but so if you can limit yourself to a short question, go at it.
Sure. I'm not sure how patiently I've been waiting, but I've been waiting. So thank you for giving me an opportunity. Yeah, I'll just keep it short then. One of the points of clarification that I find baffling from all of this is, just to be clear, not everyone can call themselves a financial planner. Actually, in order to use the term financial planner, you must be registered with the SEC as an investment advisor. SEC release 1092, issued way back in 1987, specifically stated that financial planners are regulated by the SEC under the Investment Advisors Act of 1940. And it specifically provides a standard of conduct, and including a fiduciary standard in that. And that is, you cannot call yourself a financial planner legally unless you are registered with the SEC. And yes, of course, you can have multiple designations, but I'd like you guys to address that. I mean, everyone says anyone can call themselves a financial planner. It's simply not true. The SEC regulates financial planning as a profession. So I'd love to hear what anyone says to contradict it. It's in the law.
Good question, JR. Jeff, Skip, Evan?
The law is there, but it's not enforced, period, paragraph.
Exactly. I had writers who, in the early days of the internet, mentioned that law that JR is talking about, and they went to a lawyer who said, yeah, geez, you better go register. They were writing a column on AOL. You better register as an investment advisor with the SEC. And there were thousands of people reading their papers, and they basically were told within a few years to let their registration lapse. But as it was one of those regulations passed that's on the book, and it's can remember.
Not true, actually. I mean, you cannot provide a single.
JR, okay, I'm sorry, we're at the top of the hour, and I don't know how many people have to drop off in 1 minute. But I appreciate your question. I appreciate your patience. But I'd like to give Skip the last word before the 4 o'clock bell rings. Skip?
Mute. Unmute.
Skip?
Yes, a fire alarm.
I've got a fire alarm in the hotel.
Attention. There has been a fire reported in the building.
I've heard of excuses before. That's a pretty good one, Skip.
That's original.
That is original. Skip, okay. So I guess Skip's not going to have the last word. Jeff, Evan, any last word before we hop off?
I would just like to say that professionals are by definition fiduciaries. I was in the Army in my first career. I was a fiduciary. I was a professional. I couldn't have outside income.
Gotcha.
And I think that you can't separate the two. And yeah, if that rule from the SEC were enforced, we'd have a profession.
Gotcha. Evan, any last word?
No, I just second what Jeff said. It should not be as difficult to achieve as it apparently is. And I wish Skip and the FPA lots of success.
Thank you. Then I'll take the last 15, 20 seconds. I want to thank our speakers. Jeff, thank you for coming. You added hugely to our group here. Evan, Skip, are you back on, Skip?
Well, the alarm has stopped.
Okay, so
They're
then
telling us to get out of the building, but go ahead.
Skip, don't put us in that position. But no, I've just been thanking the speakers, and I do want to give you the last word since FPA has been the focus of this. Do you have any last point in the last 15 or 30 seconds?
Yeah, and I really couldn't hear anything that was said the last couple of minutes, but there's a ton of nuance to this. JR and Kent have been active in the chat and have made some very good points. The difference between financial planning and calling I do financial planning or I am a financial planner. There's a distinction there. There's differing definitions of financial planning, so there's a ton of nuance here.
There is an emergency in the building. Do not use the elevator.
All right. Bye, Skip. I think this is it. No, I'm sure Skip will be fine. But thank you one and all for joining, and we will have the video up hopefully in the next couple hours on our website. So thank you very much.